Great.
All right, hi everyone. So I'm here with Linda, Wanda, Wei, Sarah, Mariam, and Carolyn. All right. So I appreciate getting to be here with you all today. I'm traveling, as I often am, and I found that I can make this work by stopping at a cafe in San Francisco. So that's where I am right now, at a cafe. And I got my my muffin and my tea. So this topic came through to speak to today because it's been really coming up in some of the sessions that I've been doing and just some dialogues that I've had with some friends and people in my life. And it also feels really resonant and relevant. I'm just going to bring this a little closer. I can't. For just what's happening in the US right now, where the dark side's pretty much being elected to public office. Let me just do a quick check-in. They're playing the music in the background, so I just want to make sure. Can you hear me? How's it working for everyone?
Yes, I can hear you. We can also hear the noise in the background, but we could, not to worry, we can still hear you. Are you able to move to a spot where away from the noise, or?
Seems to be coming out of the whole place.
Ah, and you're on Wi-Fi there, are you?
Yeah. If I hold it closer, does that make it better? Like this?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
I think it's David Bowie. Okay, so.
Okay.
And so yeah, we had a pretty much a situation in the U.S. where everyone being elected to office is in some way representing this dark side that I'm calling. So I want to speak a little bit about just the psychology of the dark side, and more than the psychology of it, its gift, its purpose, as I currently understand it, what it offers us. And I was just visiting with a friend of mine today who is going through a difficult time. He's going through a very hard time right now in his life. For a couple years now, he pretty much doesn't get any sleep. And he's experiencing what some people might call an entity attachment. And he's aware of this heavy presence looming over him like all the time. And so I visited him just now just to spend time with him, just to hang out. And I realized that a lot of people in his life will tend to want to give him a solution. Like, oh, you should go to this group therapy class, or you should try this technique, or you should see this teacher, see this healer. But sitting with him, and I felt this before, and I really felt it with him just now being in his presence. I really felt that there's nothing he can do. And that in fact, his whole life, he's been in love and light his whole life. And even when he became aware of a dark presence, for many years, he was just fully committed to his spiritual practice, to his teacher, and his devotional poetry is doing very beautiful things. But I see for him, and it's just my perspective, my perception, that there's nothing he can do right now. And he says over and over again that he feels like it's taking him down, that this darkness is taking him away, it's taking him down. And he'll turn every once in a while to God and just say, God, I need your help me. But being with him, what I see, he can't actually, like that prayer for God help me is almost not doing anything. Because the only place he has to go right now, in my perception, is to surrender. There's really nothing he can do. And his suffering, the very essence of his suffering as I see it, and I say this humbly because I'm not him. I'm not in his situation. But I'm just sharing what I observe. And I shared this with him and he appreciated it. That his suffering in its entirety is where he's holding on. And he said he feels like he's stuck. But I reflected there's really no such thing as being stuck. There's only a such thing as holding on. We were talking about where are all the places where you are holding on. Where are you holding on? And so we just look at exactly the things that he's feeling worried about. And that's the first thing that I want to share here. We never ever need to look further than the areas in our life that we are most concerned about in order to find out what we're holding on to. And the trick, it eludes us like pretty much all the time. The trick is we don't realize that we're the ones holding on. We don't realize that it's our own attachments and our grabbing onto the last vestiges of security that causes our own suffering. We really think that if only this could change, or if only this will happen, if I could only find a solution to that. But there's not a solution for that. The solution is stop holding it. So to give an example of this individual, one of the things he spoke about is he loves his sister, and he cares so much about his sister, and his sister is one of the last people in his life that actually wants to spend time with him. Because a lot of people just can't be around him, or if they want to be around him, they'll just give him a lot of, advice or whatever, and he can't stand that right now, as you can imagine. But his sister, he loves his sister so much, so he says, around my sister, I try to keep it together because I don't want to lose her. But then at times it's so hard when she's around, and I have to smile and listen to her talk about her life, and I just can't listen. And they said, why do you think you have to? Is it only because you're afraid that if you're really yourself, she'll leave you? And he reflected, I don't want her to stop showing up in my life. And that's the tricky thing here. He doesn't want her to be like so many other people that say, well, I can't spend time around you, you're too much. So instead, he's sacrificing the present moment. He's choosing that there are some moments, such as when he's with his sister, where it's more worthwhile for him to be polite, to be kind, to listen, even though it's not authentic. Because he's afraid that if he's authentic in this present moment, he'll lose her. And I think of Ramana Maharshi and something he taught. So this one line I heard, let what comes come, and let what goes go, and see what remains. I would add to that, be as authentic as you can in this moment, and then see what comes and see what goes. And the only thing that keeps him and all of us from really being authentic, from being true about this present moment, which the mind can't ever grasp. It doesn't know what that means. But it might mean, I can't listen to you talk right now. I'm feeling horrible. It might mean, I need to lie down and close my eyes. It might mean, I don't know what to do. I don't have an answer. And I'm just afraid that if I say that, you'll walk away. Sometimes all we can do is just be truthful about what we know. And it's never a big, this is what this moment's meant to be. This is what I'm supposed to do. It's always just right now. And what keeps us from that is a possibility of loss. And that's where we create conditions around God. That's where we create conditions around love, around wholeness, around that which is unconditioned. Our control and fundamental fear that we are not going to be safe, we're not going to have what we need, lends us to hold on and to really convince ourselves, to really rationalize why we have to hold on. And then when we get so sick, when we get so hurt and victimized and pained and diseased in our life experiences, often the last thing we'll acknowledge is it's because we're holding on. I was talking to a friend recently, and I'm going to take this to Pluto and some other stuff eventually. I was talking to a friend recently who is opening up sexually, and she has Venus. Actually, I don't have permission to share this. Forget it. But this is true for me, and it's also true for my friend. So I'll just share this general concept. As I'm opening up to more pleasure and healthy sexual intimacy in my life, the more I do that, the more I notice that there has been a tendency for me in my past, and still to some extent today, to embrace the possibility of a good, healthy connection with someone who I like, I'm attracted to the negation of getting good sleep, to the negation of being healthy and optimizing my own self-care and eating well. And the thought in my mind is, well, if I retreat from this moment with this person right now, and I say, well, I'm going to sleep first and take care of my body, and let's create another time to get together, I'm afraid that I'll lose this person. I'll lose this connection. I have a Venus-Pluto conjunction. I have Venus and Libra in the second house. Venus and Libra, relationships with others, second house, self-esteem, self-worth. So one of the energy dynamics here is where I can unhealthily, in an unhealthy way, entangle my own self-worth, my own self-esteem with being liked and wanted by another person, or second house pleasure through another. I feel good about that, even if it's not really sustainable and ultimately healthy for me in the long term. So sacrificing the needs of the body, diet, sleep, self-care, for the possibility of intimacy. And in saying no to these things that I really want for the sake of the more fundamental basis of self-care means I'm creating a standard for myself. This is important, my Venus, Pluto in the second. I'm creating a standard that I'm prioritizing self-care and self-worth first. And people will meet me there. And if someone can't meet me there, if they go, then that's okay. Because sustaining that relationship just for the sake of the intimacy wouldn't be healthy. So for me, that's another example of being willing to let go. The holding on in my case would be the holding on to the other, the holding on to the connection, the holding on to the possibility of what I might get to share with another person. The letting go is I'm going to be authentic about this moment and see what stays and see what goes. When we don't realize that we're holding on, then we don't tend to notice the extent to which we're holding on. When we begin creating these relationships in our life, we build our whole life, we build every aspect of our life on a foundation of control and holding. And the more we build it, it's a Saturn dimension, the more we crystallize our reality, the more we really believe we have to maintain the status quo, that we have to maintain this control, and thus we can't really be ourselves. We can't truly honor this present moment. And I want to share one more thing about just the notion of this present moment as I'm discovering it. As I'm always learning, and I mentioned, the present moment is something the mind has no clue about. Like, we can't create a formula for it. Because the present moment is the most intimate thing there is. And it encompasses all that is right now. So we are often used to operating from the mind, from a mental place, where we'll think about what should I do now, what's happening in my life. But the body is always operating. The body is always awake. The body is always speaking. There's always a very fundamental, non-intellectual reality speaking to us. And if we study babies and animals, and beings that aren't in their head so much, they only know how to live in the present moment. And so they emote when they need to emote, and they sleep when they need to sleep, and they eat when they need to eat. And basically all of our control and our efforts, what it's basically doing in taking us away from the moment is it's taking us away from the body. It's taking us away from what's the most instinctive, biological, fundamental aspect of our being. And when we separate from our body, we also separate from one another, because then we are only relating here. When we're not in touch with the basis of our own being, we can't really meet others on a more fundamental level as well. So we live in a culture where the status quo is, if you're sleepy, instead of yielding to that sleepiness and coming into stillness, let's say, it might not even be going to sleep, and this might be conserving energy and becoming quiet and still. I find that when I'm sleepy, if I just become completely quiet and still for a few moments, it actually helps, rejuvenates a little bit. What we tend to do is we go in the very opposite direction of what the moment's asking for. Our biology is asking for rest. We need it like an enemy. And we say, oh no, you're sleepy, I gotta wake you up. I gotta force you into awakeness. I gotta force you to be awake and alert. So we give it caffeine and stimulants. And the things that we do to ourselves and to one another on every single level. But the basic psychology comes back to this idea of control. If I let go right now, if I yield to my sleepiness, if I yield, I will be letting go of the idea that I had of being awake, being alert, being able to do something. I find that evolution in its essence is always about embracing more of the yin. The yin is always the container. It's the space. It's the basis of every single experience in our life. So often in our overly yang culture, we're in constant do, constant solution. And that's a big issue when it comes to spirituality and the journey of awakening. Because we will often look at our lives and everything that comes up in our life from the point of view of how do we solve it? What do I do? And we treat spirituality, we treat our own journey as if we have to do things right. But so seldom do we truly yield to the space of not knowing, to the space of not doing. We're afraid that if we don't do, bad things will happen. We'll lose our sister. We'll lose our plans. We'll miss the opportunity. People will judge us. If I just rest right now in this cafe, not while I'm on this talk, but let's say afterwards, and close my eyes, that's vulnerable. Becoming quiet and still in a world of movement is profoundly vulnerable. So my friend was speaking about this dark energy that's hovering on him, that's weighing him down. And as I mentioned, he feels that it's taking him. It's taking him down. It's taking down his mind, it's taking down his body, and it is. I mean, you can see the physical effects of deterioration in his body, and what he's going through right now is intense. He's told me that he feels like it's trying to pull him in. It's trying to get him to give up. And that's where there's really a fine line. And I speak this again humbly because I'm just where I am in my own journey. And I recognize this for myself in the ways that I do, but I also realize that there's a big scope of experience that I have not grasped to the extent that he is, for example. But I feel there's a fine line between giving in to the darkness and surrendering. True surrender reminds me of Neo at the end of the very last Matrix movie. If you haven't seen it, basically what happens is he goes to like the source of the darkness, and he basically oh wait, that's a good example. Let's a different part in the movie. In the first movie, when he Agent Smith was trying to kill him, he basically surrendered to it. And the inner realization was, and this is me putting it into the words, but this is basically what happened in the movie. He stopped resisting Agent Smith. You know, the whole movie is like a cat and mouse chase. He's running away from Agent Smith, who's trying to kill him. And he finally had this moment of realization that the running away, the fear, is just feeding that darkness that's chasing him. So he just yielded to it. And burst open into light. And what in my view, what happened there is he surrendered to trust a larger truth of who he is. The larger truth of what he is that can't be hurt, that can't be corrupted, that can't be invaded. Right? The only thing that can be invaded, the only thing that can be disgraced is an identity, is a self-image. Something that comes and goes, something that we hold on to, that we think we need to attach to as ourselves, that can be hurt. In fact, anything that we hold on to makes us inherently vulnerable to some extent, because that which we hold on to is subject to be taken or disgraced or abused. But there's that aspect of who we are, the source of what we are, that doesn't come and go, that can't be tarnished, that we never have to hold on to, we never have to find it. And that's at Neptune. aspect of consciousness, meaning the source, the oneness that we are, doesn't change. It's the essential truth of our being. Realizing that and choosing to align ourselves with that gives us the courage and the faith to face darkness and not to run from it, nor to give into it. Giving into it is really kind of like fear. It's giving our will over to it. What I'm speaking of here is a true surrender, knowing that it can take us, it can hurt us, it can do what it wants to us. But when we choose to stay in peace and to focus our attention on the ultimate truth of who we are, the only thing that will be taken from us is that which was not needed. The only thing that could possibly be taken from us is that which is not eternal. And I honor my friend because I think he's on a journey of awakening. I could see that in him. And I offered that, my view, and hopefully that's meaningful for him, for a friend to be sharing that perspective with him. Hopefully it's not frightening for someone to say, yep, I'm pretty sure you can't do anything. And I think that's great. And the only thing left for you is to realize that. I mean, that could be totally frightening. And I think it's, he's really wanting to find a solution, but he also, at the same time, is identified with this thought, there's no solution for me, I'm stuck. And to him I say, no, you're not stuck. You could just stop holding on. I think maybe that's possible for you. I'll just leave that for you. So maybe that will be a realization for him at some point, because really in the end, that's the only place to go. It's the only place left, which is to let go. Although we have a choice. And this is the nature of the dark side and the nature of consciousness itself. We have the choice to really let go and surrender. And when I speak about letting go, I want to speak a little bit more about that, because in all of our lives, we become aware of the patterns that we hold on to, the identities that we really hold on to as if all of life counted upon it. All of life kind of does depend on it. The life of our illusory sense of self depends on it. So we hold on for the sake of that dear life. But when we see how much energy it takes, that protection, and that it's basically just a way of controlling and saying to the universe, I don't trust you. I'm going to hold on to this identity. I don't trust what will happen if I let go. I'm going to lose these things that I care about most. So as we unravel that in our own lives, as we see that, the experience of evolution, what I find, it's consciously noticing where energy wants to move, noticing the conditioned pattern where there's an impulse, an addictive impulse to go. And in just the awareness of it, considering that there might be another way. In fact, the other way is always going to be silence. Because silence is what's primordial, it's what's of essence, and it's the one thing we don't embrace when we're in that addictive, compulsive behavior of just doing what we are conditioned to do. For me, and I speak about this often, because if you know my chart, I have 7 planets in total. South Node, I see 5 planets, all in the ice, in Sag, in the 3rd and 4th house. Then I got a Pluto in the 2nd house. So for me, the very strong identity is someone who knows, someone who has an answer, and the identity structure is I have something to say. I'm able to explain something. And to come back to a place of silence and stillness, and to feel valid in that, to feel like that is okay. That the silence brings up the fear. And I spoke about this last, I have Uranus on the South Node, so a lot of my identity structure is oriented around, in a sense, dissociating by way of being able to speak answers that are well thought out. But when you put Uranus and Sag in the 3rd house, the dissociative and traumatic quality of that is I can talk for 2 hours and not really mean what I'm saying. Like, it may not be an actual direct experience inside of myself. It might just be words and realizations I've had that I'm able to recall and spout out. And you can sense that. I mean, if you're sensitive, you can hear that, and that would be exhausting for anyone that's listening as well. So for all of us, whatever that pattern is, stillness truly is the foundation. And in that stillness, it's just like a little reminder that truth is possible right now.
Oops, it looks like we've lost connection. Let's just wait a moment.
I just lost connection for one moment.
It's okay, we're back, and
Let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead, Ari Moshe.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, good.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
So I've been into many relationships. I have Pisces descendant. Hell, I'll scare my screen. This will be useful to look at. So as it's coming up, I have Pisces on the descendant. Pull it up. Okay. Okay, everyone. So I have Pisces on the descendant right here. Squaring my nodes. I just want to make sure. Can you still hear me?
Yes. Yes. We just wait.
Oh no.
Oops.
I'm so sorry. Your voice is breaking up. My apologies.
Okay, you go ahead, Ari Moshe. We can still hear you pretty well.
You can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm just gonna continue flowing. I'm not gonna pull up any charts. Let's basically say this. For me, I've kept myself in relationships in an active role where I'm a counselor. Pisces descendant squaring the nodes with the Sag South node. The basic idea is my sense of self has been linked to, can I help another person? Can I have insight for them? What that's done for me is it's prevented the possibility of intimacy. And as I mentioned, my Venus in the second house in Libra conjunct Pluto, my own self-worth and self-esteem has been wrapped up around how I can give to another person. So being able to follow that pattern and to drop into silence, into stillness, and actually relax just into this moment. I notice that when I'm in a place of operating under that teacher, guide, counselor role, I'm often not breathing deeply. So these are just things that we learn. We become mindful of that along the journey. Okay, so as I was saying before, we have that choice, the choice to evolve, which really starts with a conscious awareness of, I'm doing something here, there's a pattern here, and we could always bank on the awareness that we're holding on, even if we don't know that we're holding on. That's the fun thing. We don't actually need to consciously know that we're holding on, to just sort of trust that we are. And just the reflection on that brings us down this journey of greater self-awareness. The other choice is to operate out of fear. And if you look at Trump and other people that are coming into power in this country, in the US, it's very clear that they're at a place in their own journey where, to an extent, they've abnegated their own free will. They've given up that capacity to think in terms of evolution and growth. At some point, they become identified with being the victim. Trump, early in his life, he has Pluto, Mars, new phase in Leo in the 12th house. Something he once said early in his life, and he's recorded on video and saying this, is that he said, since I was young, I've seen this world as a very unsafe, threatening place where everyone's going to try to up you. Everyone's going to try to win and do better than you. And that I learned really early on that I have to fight harder and try better than everyone else. And of course, that's not true. Life isn't inherently a place that's threatening, that's going to up you and beat you if you're not strong enough. But at some point in his own past, he was victimized. He felt small, Pluto and Leo in the 12th. He felt like he wasn't powerful enough, wasn't seen. And instead of yielding to his attachments, right? Because the one who doesn't feel seen, what's their attachment? What's surrendering? What are they letting go of? The need to be seen. It's like whatever we're holding on to, we tend to get so concerned with that. But we don't often realize we can actually let go of it, because that's simply what we're holding on to. That's the identity that we're trying to sustain. So instead of realizing, oh, I'm creating my own suffering because I'm addicted to people respecting me, here we go. Okay. Instead of realizing I'm creating my own suffering because I'm addicted to people respecting me, and then turning towards our own holding on, the other choice is to say, I need people to respect me. I'm not going to let this happen again. And that's how the dark side works. And it points at our greatest attachments, at our greatest vulnerabilities. And the most courageous thing to do is to let it take us away, to let it take us apart. Some of my greatest fears in my life in this journey has been what women will think of me. So much of my own self-image and self-esteem has been wrapped around how my partners and women in general regard me as a human being, regard me as a man. And some of the most painful experiences of my life has been when various partners in my life have seen me in ways that was absolutely devastating. Not seeing me as honest, not seeing me as trustworthy, not seeing me as a good listener. And these are things that I've been most identified with. And to want to show them I'm a good listener would in fact be proving that I'm not a good listener. And it would be pushing myself further and further into that vibration of control and fear. To actually let that part of myself that's addicted to them seeing me as a good listener, which has nothing to do with being a good listener, to let that part die, to let that part feel hurt, to let that part feel unseen, to let that part feel abandoned, and just to let it die, to say, wow, you feel really hurt. And if I were to do anything about that, I would be pushing myself deeper into a well. And I would be doing everything but listening. And that's the beautiful thing about the death process of Pluto. We actually are acknowledging that a part of us is dying. It's being stabbed, killed, totally torn apart. And inside we can say thank you for it. Because if we're really turning towards our own evolution, there is the possibility for all of us to consciously know that at the same time. To understand and to realize that this is just the falling of away, but is not eternal. And sometimes it's the grace, and this is one of the functions that I see of the dark side, ultimately. It arises in our life, and the gift that it offers us, the reflection that it offers to us, is exactly where we have the opportunity to let go. And sometimes we can't see that. Sometimes we won't have the ability to recognize what we're holding onto without that. In fact, we may not even know that we're holding onto something at all. But where the terror and the fear arises most in our life. There was once a time in my life, I have a Mercury-Neptune conjunction, which can be pretty far out there in terms of, wanting to transcend with the mind, wanting to go all kinds of places and wanting to access a greater spirituality. Oh, there I am. So check out my Mercury-Neptune conjunction out there. And it also is it's sextile to Pluto. When I was, many years ago, in my early 20s, I was practicing astral projection. And I took a couple courses online where we would learn how to astral project, which means separating from your body while you're falling asleep and becoming lucid, becoming aware of yourself in the astral plane. I was fascinated by that, but it was so cool. And that's very much a Mercury-Neptune or Neptune third house kind of thing. And we would talk to different entities. Eventually, the students would travel to Egypt together in the astral plane and meet up there. I never quite got there. What began happening to me is I would do this. At a certain point, I began encountering, well, this happened twice. Let me just recall. Yeah, this happened twice. So the first time it happened, I was, all these women in white would meet up with me and they would have sex with me all night. And I would wake up and I would go back to sleep. And I would have sex with this woman again. And it was depleting. It wasn't a good kind of experience. And then I learned about the concept of incubus, succubus, and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, whoa, I don't want to do that. I don't want to mess with these energies. So at a certain point, I just stopped practicing because I realized I was exposing myself to a lot of dark energy. But what it brought out in me, if you think about my Mercury-Neptune in the fourth in Sag, Neptune rules my descendant. And my descendant, as I mentioned, squares the nodal axis of my moon. And that Mercury-Neptune, and it's ruled by Jupiter, part of what that reflects is where I've been a sort of like savior, guru, teacher, hero complex type guy in the past. And fourth house is women, seventh house is descendant, being spiritualized and idealized as like a pure teacher that women love. Like that dynamic is inside of me. And there have been past lives where I've been a teacher and there's been some really deeply unintegrated parts of my own being, sexually and emotionally. And so there has been some unhealthy dynamics that's happened with me in relationships in the past because I wasn't embracing the human fourth house, like the human emotional part. I was all into the super spiritual, going beyond that. Neptune, Sagittarius, Jupiter. And so many of my relationships didn't connect me in the most subjective human parts of myself. I was distanced from that. I ran away from that, Sagittarius. So there's a lot of sort of disconnected types of, being a savior for other people and all that, but personal family, personal relationships isn't something I did very well in the past. So that dream experience made me like more aware of that, not wanting to do that. So I stopped practicing. I figured I'm not grounded enough. It was breaking up shadow in me that I wasn't even aware of at the time. A year later, I began practicing again. I felt more grounded, and I began running into beings that offered me magical powers. And they were doing all these symbols and things like that. And they said, if you want to learn how to fly, we can show you how to fly. And I used to really want to be able to fly. That's just a thing. Like when I was growing up, I really wanted to fly. And I'm like, really? How do you fly? And they said, well, you just sign this contract and these beings will be with you. And whenever you want, they'll pick you up. And something in me said no. And so I stopped. And then I stopped practicing astral projection again. Because that experience with those beings, it brought up in me more awareness of that shadow, this desire to escape, this desire to have magical powers to transcend. It's exactly where in my own life I wasn't present. It's exactly where I still preferred a life of transcendence and escaping than this actual reality. And I was facing that. I was facing the danger of that in those dreams with these beings that were wanting to, quote unquote, help me out. So, and also, sextiling that Pluto, there's a lot of appeal for me in having sexual power, in being self-sufficient. I can do things on my own. But the thing about Pluto in the second house, the temptation of the darkness, is it'll give you the illusion of being self-sufficient, but it's actually a dependency. And the true power of Pluto in the second house isn't just this idea of I'm self-sufficient unto myself, because the personal self isn't self-sufficient. I depend on you. I depend on the air. I depend on the farmers. I depend on everything. Like the second house, there's no true self-sufficiency. The true awakening of Pluto in the second, I find, is the inherent sovereignty and self-sufficiency of the soul. Not of Ari Moshe, not of the personality, but the wholeness, the self-reliance I can give completely to the soul itself. That will give me everything that I need at every level, and that I will always be given all that I need to do my work in the world. And thus I don't have to form a contract or do anything to hold on to anyone or anything for the sake of any illusion of self-reliance and personal power. So oftentimes we won't know where we're holding on until life in its grace will make us exposed to the darkness. And then we'll be like, oh, I don't want to go that route. But now I see that there's some stuff for me to work on and let go of here. So I'm going to share one more story. I think it's really a cool story of all my charts up. So my Venus, Pluto, and also my Pisces square in the nodes, my whole life I've had this funny thing going on inside of my mind, which is like this. Will I find a partner first, or will I wake up first? And it's been like a dichotomy for me. I think it's kind of funny. I think a lot of people might have this though. This dichotomy between this desire for partnership and the desire to wake up. And so one night, not too long ago, I just asked God to kind of clarify this for me. Because it felt so odd that I was holding these two as almost like a one or the other. And by the way, the reason why it felt like one or the other is because I've done so much seeking. I've thought about relationship as this big, unintegrated part of my journey, and that I need to find someone. These deeper needs that are unfulfilled. Venus, in Libra, conjunct Pluto, can be obsessed with partnership, can be obsessed with relationships, can be obsessed with sexuality. So it's often consumed a lot of my energy. And so I wanted to see, how to really relate to all of this. And I received a message in my dream, and I was told, finding your partner and waking up will happen at the same time. And I thought that was the coolest thing, the realization that I had. And this is really the fundamentals of Pluto. This is the essence of Pluto. At a certain point, we all have the idea or the perception that there's something out there that we need. There's something left unresolved. And that, in a sense, keeps us moving along this journey. But it also perpetually implies the duality of there's something other than right now. There's something left unresolved, something I have yet to find that will make me whole. Keeps us from really trusting in the wholeness of this moment. The true essence of Pluto is the inner marriage. Pluto's about marriage, so we might marry someone else, but what's really going on is the inner marriage, the Shiva and the Shakti, the sacred union on the inside. And when that inner marriage is complete, when the Kundalini rises, the impulse for finding something isn't there. It doesn't mean there won't be desire and interest and a calling for the next thing, but the need, that I need to find this next thing, the investment in there being something else that will bring me completion, that's not there anymore. And I honor that. I see that in many awakened beings. And I honor that state and the potential of a human being to be in that state. And what I realized one night was the goddess, the partner, is truly inside of me. And what just kind of hit me, it's sort of obvious. It'll probably sound obvious to you. I'm only going to attract people that resonates with my inner relationship to myself. And so the extent to which I have not awakened the primal forces within me will reflect in, partnerships where I'll get to explore that. I'm only going to come into partnerships in ways that reflects my own awakeness. I'm only able to relate with others as a reflection of my own inner union with myself. It just hit me as, oh, that's obvious. And that's, Venus, Pluto in the second house. And when I saw that, I really just feel like I entered a new level of letting go of the search, which is so relieving for a Venus-Pluto conjunction. Oh my God, to let go of the need, that craving to find the next person, especially with Mars and Libra in the first. There's a lot of, it's a part of why I'm a counselor and I do the work that I do, because it allows me to use a lot of my energy to direct it in other people's lives and to be intimate in healthy and clean ways, and to, be in relations with others and to engage on a soul level. And I learn a lot and heal a lot through that. Yeah, take those arrows away. Anyway, so it helped me to really just get that I can fully focus on the inner, on the marriage with my inner lover, Venus, to be in relationship and to listen, Libra, to the lover that's on the inside, second house, and to feel content and confident in that relationship. And that relationship, as it consummates, will always reflect itself in each moment with the relationships with other people as it is most relevant and useful as a reflection. Because I trust that it's always just a reflection. So I'm going to stop my speaking now, and we can talk a little bit about charts, and people can ask questions, and we'll see if we can keep it about just the realm of the dark side, and each of us working with our own holding on, and where we become invested in the control to hold on and resist the letting go, and see what we might want to examine. We can look at a couple charts, and then I'll get back on the road.
Okay, Ari, thank you for that. Shall I keep your chart up for a little while?
No, you can close my chart.
Okay. Okay, any questions?
Linda, could I ask a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hey, Ari.
Hey, who's speaking?
Hi, Ari. Mariam, it's Mariam.
Hi, Mariam.
Hi. It's actually a question that I did want to bring up in a session before this when we were looking at the charts, and it's related to an addictive behavior that I have, and addictive to certain medications, and this is a struggle that I've had for a couple of years, and I've always felt like if I've related it to love coming from outside of myself. So if I had enough support, if I had enough love around me, then I would be able to have the strength to let go of certain addictions. And I think from what you're saying is that you have to really hold the space for yourself, to have enough love for yourself, not to be reaching out from anything outside of yourself, to really have the strength to let go, or to look at the shadow side of yourself and really just accept it as it is.
Tell me, if you want to share, what have you been addicted to? Like, what is the nature of the medications you've been addicted to?
It's medications. The real addiction is body image, is self-image.
So I'm going to tune into this for a moment here. So this is a great example. I'm going to work with you a little bit on this, Miriam, just within the realm of what I'm speaking about here. Mm-hmm. So the medications would serve the purpose of, what would you say you gained from that in terms of your own self-image?
They help me express myself. I feel like they help me express myself more naturally.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't be
But
one. Yeah, please.
in terms of it's a very body kind of feeling. So like it's very tangible how I feel my body looks like.
Mm-hmm.
That helps me to express myself. This is my belief, this is
Yes.
how I feel.
So, and I remember speaking with you about this a little once before, and I wouldn't want to at all suggest what to do or not to do, but I'll share the reflections that I can see just from your chart.
Okay.
You have Uranus in Scorpio in the second house, and it's the ruler of your south node. It also squares the sun in Leo in the 11th, which is the ruler of your north node. The sun in the 11th, squaring Uranus in the second, speaks so strongly to self-esteem, self-worth, being your own beautiful self, regardless of how different that is. Now, just the quality of liberation that I see naturally unfolding for you in this lifetime is a liberation from, let me just find the right words for a moment. Liberation from any conditioned notion of beauty. Liberation from any idea of beauty and self-esteem and value that is based on something that can come and go. It's basically an awakening to the inherent intrinsic beauty, and not just in a conceptual way, the true inherent intrinsic beauty of your own soul, of your true individual self. Uranus in the 11th house is about the soul individuality, what we are when we strip away all conditioning. And Scorpio is where we hold on. So it's holding on to a projection, Uranus, a projection of the mind. And of course, it's rooted in past life trauma. There's trauma here around this that corresponds to the projection around body image and self-esteem. But just to speak to the liberation process, and one thought I would offer to you is, let me just find the right words for this. Since we're looking at the nature of projection, to actually examine your own thoughts and to see that this is only contained within the realm of your own thoughts. So to feel a way about yourself, to, let's say, practice this, and I'm not at all advising to not be on medications, but something to practice when not on medications, to examine the thoughts, the projections, the notions you might have about your own body image, about your own self. And to notice when you create these thoughts, when you believe these projections about your own image, what do you do? What happens? How do you feel? How do you live your life? How do you hold yourself? What do you do? To actually become aware of how, when you believe the projection, that becomes the focal point for how you live your life. And to consider what would happen if you let go of that projection. And it's, if you're familiar with the work of Byron Katie, I often suggest that line of inquiry. It's basically a method of noticing the thoughts that we think, and then coming back to, is that true? And what if it wasn't true? Who would I be? If I didn't believe this, who would I be? What would happen? And it's basically holding on to a holographic reality where, as long as you have that belief, that idea, there's something off about my beauty. There's something inherently unbeautiful about who I am. That thought form becomes a holograph or a whole world that you experience. But when you let go of that, you get to awaken to this inherent and intrinsic self. And I think in terms of the holding on that we find with Scorpio and Pluto, to actually just notice it as that. Again, I'm not advising to let go. I'm just saying that a part of this might just be notice that there is a holding on. Like, to actually notice the energy of it, and to See, like when we're so used to holding on, we don't know that we're holding on because it's like it has to be this way. So we develop patterns of behaviors that we don't realize aren't intrinsic to who we are. So just realizing the energy of holding on and noticing what that looks like, what it smells like, what it feels like. My friend, I really feel strongly for you that a part of this journey is, in fact, shining light into this world, being a role model, being an example of inherent beauty. And that's really evident with your Leo sun in the 11th and the squaring that you're on, actually helping others to liberate, to feel deeply included as they are in their own creative essence, and finding self-worth and self-esteem that's intrinsic unto itself, that is just inherent to who we are, not because of any factor that comes and goes. I think your own personal transformation with self-love and self-acceptance, which really seems to be at the core, like you couldn't do something to make yourself feel better, and because it's not about doing something, this is about letting go of the doing and seeing the inherent beauty. Just like looking up at the stars and being breathtaken by its beauty, seeing that as yourself. I think as that personal transformation continues to open up, there's so much that opens up for you to share with others as well. Just by you being you, just by being who you are. Thanks, Linda.
Okay, thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Miriam.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question. This is Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, Ari. You in your sharing earlier, you talked about part of your story about going in through the experience of the astral projection and identifying some of your shadow desires.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting. Just kind of reflecting back to me, because in part of my awakening to the point I'm at now, because I went through a very catalytic kind of experience, I registered, I went through that very same thing on the astral projection part, what I was inviting in, and then what I had to be aware of that was a part of my experience in the shadow. So that kind of highlighted it, because I'd never heard a lot about it. So I went into studying the shadow from Carl Jung and others in different perspectives, but I'd never heard of any other person share it like that, and it kind of reflected back to me. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't recommend it to anyone.
No.
Just anyone. It's such a powerful practice, but like all practices, it's the heart that we bring to it that's most important.
Yes. Yeah, because it was very, very powerful, and yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but what you're invited to see is quite plutonic.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Actually, it's interesting, Sarah. I'm going to ask a very similar question about the astral projection. I feel I didn't really try to practice that, but like for about maybe 2 years of my life, I was almost afraid to fall asleep, because every time I fall asleep, I kind of, go into that place. And so I reflect about that. I think it's like a deep fear of not having enough power of my soul to really maintain the freedom. Does that make sense? It's almost like once I feel I already break free from the past trauma or entrapment, then maybe something showed up in my left ear. It's like to tell me the darkness still have the power over me.
Are you saying, first of all, Linda, that's not Wade's chart. That's the wrong chart.
Yeah, I've got Way's chart up on the screen.
No, you don't. That's not her chart.
What is it? Who is it? Oh my gosh. That's
That
not,
looks like that's Wanda's chart, if I remember correctly.
yeah, sorry. Looks like I haven't got Way's chart here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So, Wade, can you clarify if you're asking? I'm not sure what the question is, or if you're asking one.
Yeah, I'm just asking, like, how do you maybe surrender or letting go of that fear, like the darkness or the past trauma still has the power over me? I'm not actually really break free from that fear.
If I understand what you're saying, like surrendering versus breaking free, like I'll speak to what I think you might be addressing. I'm not sure if this is it, but I was once living in a home where I was being attacked at night by this being that was hanging out in the house. Not like violently, but it was definitely fucking with me. And you know, it was there. And it was really terrifying, actually. And then I would go to sleep and I would have these nightmares. And there's like this one night where in the sleep I was like, okay, Jesus, 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 and like it didn't work.
That's exactly what I experienced. It's almost like I'm so scared to fall asleep because I feel even they cannot attack my body, but if I fall asleep, they have power over my soul.
Yes, and that's kind of what I was saying about my friend that I was speaking about earlier. It's like he spent years doing good things, like reciting mantra, doing his practices, meditating, like being a very, very focused on the light, and also very focused, in a sense, focusing on the light is also focusing on protection, because as long as we're focusing there, you know, and we're armed with the mantras and the techniques, and you know, we can protect ourselves. But the one thing that I offered him, that's kind of what I realized, is what if I just trusted that I'm held and supported by the larger destiny of my soul. It's like the distrust in the larger destiny and dharma that is completely beyond my control, that is beyond my hands, leads me to think that I need to fight off all these dark energies. So at a certain point, and this is kind of true now, it doesn't happen as often as it does, and I'm not expecting anything one way or another, but what eventually started happening, and even in other instances, where I'll see things in my room or I'll be aware of it, I don't even light sage. That's what I tend to notice. You know, I don't want to make it an absolute, but I found myself just going back to sleep. And it's almost like I'm not afraid. I used to be freaked out. Like when I would see things like that, I would freak out.
Yeah.
But I realized like it's only fear. It needs fear. Like it can't do anything. So just kind of like staying chill. And for me, it's about trusting, well, I'm going to, you know, do the best that I can right now and just continue living my life, following my path. And I'm open to learning more about myself. If it has information for me, if it wants to reflect more shadow stuff for me, I'm so ready to learn. But meanwhile, it's like I just trust that I'm being carried by hands much greater than my own. And it's like, since I kind of realized that, these things haven't been happening. Or when it comes up, it just doesn't seem to freak me out.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It's almost like if I can trust my soul or even greater, the source energy protection, that when I had that dream, it's not as intense as before.
Right. And it's sort of, it's better, it's deeper than protection from anything, because it's a trust in the ultimate nature. It's a trust in the ultimate truth. It's like, well, if I'm going to get hurt, if it's going to hurt me, if I'm going to be attacked, it's only going to be attacking something that isn't real. Like, the only thing that can be hurt, the only part of me that can be in some way hurt by this energy is a part of me that's attached to something that isn't necessary for me right now.
Yeah.
So it's just like letting everything become medicine in that way. It's like a snake's coming to bite me, and if it bites me, the venom will go to all the places in my body that are sick already, and it'll help the sick parts fall away.
Yeah.
But the eternal parts can't fall away. So it's better than protection. It's just like, well, I only have to fear losing what isn't eternal, so can't lose really in the end. Not to be naive about that, I think there's definitely a place also for, standing strong and calling in Jesus and other things like that, and being able to say no. But staying, a lot of times our efforts come from a place of fear, and it just kind of makes it harder, turns up the volume really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel like if I in those things, if I back with the fear, it's usually get worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend once created a play where it's like this guy going on this whole journey, and he was like afraid of this darkness, and he had this realization that the darkness was his shadow, and that it always moved with him. Like, if he moved, it moved. So he began dancing, and he realized that when he dances, the shadow dances. And he began dancing with the shadow, and he realized that it was all poetry and beautiful. And there was the fear of it, that it's kind of like when you're running away from a dog. The dog will probably chase after you, but when you realize dog nature, you can just stop and the dog will stop.
Exactly.
Hey, Miriam, I want to check in. Were you complete? I just wanted to, I had the intuition to see if there's anything else you wanted to speak to or ask about or just share.
Yeah, that was really helpful. But I did want to ask you. You called it the dark side, and the shadow. And does the black moon Lilith have anything to do with that? Because it's the dark side of the moon. Does it have any? Is there any correlation?
I'm not the best person to speak to about black moon Lilith, but I wanted to say it's conjunct your Uranus, as Linda just pointed out. So that might be something to definitely tune into. And Jeff Green talks a lot about black moon Lilith as the original nature of the wild, untamed feminine that has been suppressed and repressed and persecuted. And it's a power that we connect with, a primal force, a primal power. Make you think about that, it being connected to the moon. It's not an actual point, but it's related to the position of the moon. We can think of it as like the aspect of the feminine that has been hidden and not honored. And this would have a lot to do with the power of sexuality, the power of the body, and second house, self-esteem, self-worth, and living in your own wholeness. I mean, it's clear from this chart that if it's okay to say that there would have been pretty strong traumas in the past around just those very things. I observe that black moon Lilith often corresponds to an awakening of rage and anger. That's often like that arises inside of us. Hell, you got Pluto in the first house ruling that, right? So it's there's a lot of energy there in realizing your power. It's opening up to greater vitality that may have not been available prior. But yeah, that's probably the most I can say about black moon Lilith. I haven't studied it or observed it enough to really speak about it in depth.
Okay, thanks, Ari.
Sure. Okay, so this feels like a good closing. Hopefully the sound worked out for you guys and you enjoyed the soundtrack. I'm going to put my video on just to say hello and goodbye to you guys.
Wow, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, Linda.
Okay,
To be with you all. Much love to you all.
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Ari.